Malik Thompson walked into the small private airport holding the tiny hand of his 6-year-old daughter, Zoe. She was full of energy, her curly hair bouncing with each excited step, and her pink backpack was shaped like a cartoon bear. Malik smiled down at her, carrying just one duffel bag and a tablet tucked under his arm. It was early morning and the airport lounge was quiet, filled with polished marble floors and soft jazz music playing in the background. Zoe looked around wide-eyed. "Daddy, this place looks like a hotel," Malik chuckled. "It's kinda like one baby, just for planes." He was dressed simply in jeans and a dark hoodie, sneakers that had clearly seen better days, and no flashy watch or jewelry. He looked more like someone catching a bus than someone about to board a private jet. A few of the other passengers sitting nearby glanced up, but no one seemed to recognize him. That was exactly how he liked it. The front desk agent smiled and waved them toward the boarding area. "Right through those doors, Mr. Thompson. Your flight is ready." Malik nodded with a quiet thank you and guided Zoe toward the sleek silver jet parked just outside on the tarmac. A few steps up the stairs, they were greeted by a sharply dressed flight attendant. Her name tag read Clarissa. She was tall, wore red lipstick, and had her blonde hair pulled back into a perfect bun. Her smile faded slightly when she saw Malik and Zoe. "Are you with the Johnson family?" she asked, glancing past him like she expected someone else to appear. Malik smiled politely. "No, just me and my daughter. We're all set." Clarissa hesitated, her eyes scanning him from head to toe, then glancing at Zoe. "Oh, all right, then. Seats are in the back." Malik didn't say anything. He wasn't here to make a scene. He just nodded and led Zoe past the few other passengers who had already boarded, an older couple reading magazines and a young woman scrolling on her phone. Zoe picked a window seat and squealed softly, pressing her nose against the glass. "Daddy, we're really flying on this plane?" "We sure are," Malik said, putting their bag into the overhead compartment. Clarissa walked by and gave him a tight smile, then turned to the other passengers. "If anyone needs anything, I'll be at the front." She walked off without asking if Malik or Zoe needed anything. He noticed, but didn't say a word. He was used to moments like this. Zoe giggled again. "Do they have snacks on this plane?" "I'm sure they do," Malik said, gently brushing a curl out of her face. "Let's wait and see, all right?" As they settled in, Malik pulled out a picture book from his backpack and started reading it with Zoe. Her laughter was soft but cheerful, filling the quiet cabin with a bit of life. A few seats away, the older couple smiled warmly at the sound. But Clarissa, walking past again with a tray of drinks, paused and frowned. She offered a glass of orange juice to the woman on the far left, a bottled water to the man beside her, and when she passed Malik and Zoe, she didn't stop. Not even a glance. Malik noticed again. Still, he kept his calm. He had lived long enough to know which battles were worth fighting, and this wasn't one. At least not yet. The engine started to hum and Zoe reached for her dad's hand. He held it gently. "Excited?" he asked. She nodded quickly. "This is gonna be so cool." The plane lifted off smoothly, the small private jet cutting through, the sky like a whisper. Outside the window, the clouds looked like soft pillows. Inside, Zoe stared in wonder, her legs swinging under the seat. Once they reached cruising altitude, Clarissa came by again with a tray of small packaged snacks and drinks. Without even a glance at Malik's row, she offered snacks to the others. One of the other passengers, an elderly woman with a kind face, raised an eyebrow. "I think you missed that little girl back there," she said gently, pointing toward Zoe. Clarissa hesitated, then turned back. She gave Malik a tight, forced smile. "Oh, does she want something?" Malik kept his tone even. "She'd love some juice, thank you." Clarissa handed over a juice box and 2 cookies, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. She walked away without saying another word. Zoe, unaware of the strange tension, happily sipped her juice and offered 1 cookie to her dad. "Want one, Daddy?" Malik smiled and took it. "Thank you, sweetheart." A few minutes later, Zoe accidentally dropped the empty juice box on the floor while reaching for her backpack. She tried to grab it, but it rolled under the seat. "I'm sorry," she said, quickly. Malik leaned down to pick it up, but Clarissa was already walking down the aisle again and noticed it first. She let out a sharp sigh. "Let's try to keep the cabin clean," she said in a firm voice. "These planes aren't easy to clean up after." Malik straightened slowly. "It was just an accident. I've got it." Clarissa pursed her lips, clearly not pleased, but walked away without responding. Zoe leaned close to her dad and whispered, "Did I do something bad?" Malik wrapped his arm around her gently. "No, baby, you didn't do anything wrong." He looked out the window for a moment, watching the clouds drift by. The sky was calm, but he could feel something building beneath the surface. He wasn't angry, at least not yet, but he was disappointed. And more than that, he was used to being treated this way. People saw his skin color, his hoodie, his quiet way of walking, and they made assumptions. But today would be different. Today, some assumptions were going to be proven wrong in a way no one on that plane could have expected, and it was only the beginning. Zoe had fallen asleep with her head resting on her father's arm. The soft hum of the jet engines and the steady rhythm of the flight had rocked her into a peaceful nap. Malik gently shifted to pull a blanket over her small frame, brushing her cheek with care. He smiled, watching her sleep, grateful for these quiet moments. They were rare, and he cherished every one of them. He reached for his tablet and opened a document he had been working on. Notes for a mentorship program he was building to help young people learn about business and technology. He glanced out the window now and then, enjoying the view, his mind full of ideas and dreams. But the peace didn't last long. Clarissa, the flight attendant, walked down the aisle again. She glanced at Malik with the same cold expression she'd had earlier. She passed by, offering warm towels to the other passengers. But again, she didn't offer one to Malik. He looked up, made eye contact with her briefly, then returned to his tablet. He wasn't surprised. He had noticed her behavior from the start, polite and kind to others, distant and impatient with him. When Zoe stirred in her sleep and shifted a little, her toy bunny dropped from her lap to the floor. Malik leaned down and picked it up, tucking it under her arm again. Clarissa returned with a tray of small sandwiches. She smiled as she handed them out to the elderly couple and the young woman across the aisle. When she reached Malik's row, she didn't stop. Malik looked up and spoke gently. "Excuse me, can my daughter have a sandwich when she wakes up?" Clarissa barely looked at him. "There may not be extras," she said flatly. Malik stayed calm. "She's a passenger like everyone else," Clarissa sighed. "This plane wasn't prepared for children. I suggest you pack more snacks next time." Malik blinked slowly, keeping his voice level. "I packed enough. I just assumed this flight had basic service for everyone." She didn't reply. She walked away quickly, as if ending the conversation. Malik looked down at Zoe, still sleeping, peacefully. He rubbed his forehead, disappointed but not surprised. 15 minutes later, Zoe woke up. "Daddy, are we almost there?" she asked with a yawn. "Not yet, sweetie. A little while longer. I'm hungry. I'll see what we can do." He gently pressed the service button. After a minute, Clarissa appeared. "Yes?" she asked, her tone tight. "My daughter's awake. She's hungry. Could she have a sandwich now?" Clarissa didn't smile. "We've already served everyone. You should have asked earlier." "I did ask earlier," Malik replied, his voice still calm. Clarissa frowned as if annoyed. "Well, there's nothing left now." Zoe looked up at her father, confused. "It's okay, Daddy." But Malik wasn't just thinking about the sandwich. He was thinking about the message being sent, not just to him, but to his daughter. "I'd like some water for her at least," he said softly. Clarissa turned sharply. "You can wait, I'm busy." Then she added under her breath, "Honestly, you're making too much of a fuss for a guest." Malik raised his eyebrows slightly. "Guest?" Clarissa seemed to realize she had said something out loud she hadn't meant to. But instead of apologizing, she crossed her arms. "This is a quiet flight, sir. I'd appreciate it if you didn't disturb the other passengers." Malik stared at her, his patience beginning to thin. "I've said nothing rude. I'm just asking for the same service everyone else is getting." At that moment, Zoe shifted again and knocked her juice box. This time, it tipped over and spilled, a few drops on the tray. Malik reached for a napkin in his backpack to clean it. Clarissa rushed over quickly, looking down at the tray. "Seriously?" she said, clearly frustrated. "Do you know how hard it is to clean these seats?" "It was an accident," Malik replied, calmly wiping it up. "You need to control your child better," she snapped. Malik looked directly at her. "She's 6 years old and she's doing just fine." Clarissa looked down her nose at him, eyes narrowed. "I think you've overstayed your welcome on this flight." He gently placed the napkin on the tray. "You think that because of how I look?" Her eyes widened slightly. "I didn't say that. But you're acting like it," Malik said evenly. Clarissa crossed her arms again. "Sir, I'm asking you to lower your voice." "I haven't raised it," Malik said, still calm. "But I think you have something to work out. Maybe not with me, but with how you treat people." And then something surprising happened. Clarissa reached out as if to take the tray back, but her hand moved too quickly and hit Malik's shoulder in the process. Not hard, but enough to make the older couple watching sit up straighter. Everyone noticed. The young woman across the aisle frowned. That didn't look right. Clarissa pulled her hand back quickly. "I didn't mean—" Malik stood slowly, careful not to disturb Zoe. He looked Clarissa in the eyes, not angry, not loud, but steady. "I'd like to speak to the pilot," he said simply. Clarissa looked nervous now. "There's no reason for that." "There is," Malik said calmly. A few seconds later, the co-pilot stepped out from the front of the cabin. He was smiling until he saw Malik standing. "Oh, Mr. Thompson," he said quickly. "Is everything all right?" Clarissa froze. The co-pilot turned to her. "Is there a problem here?" Clarissa looked completely confused. "You know him?" The co-pilot nodded, straightening his posture. "Yes. He owns the plane." Clarissa blinked, her mouth slightly open. Malik didn't say a word. He just sat back down quietly beside his daughter, who was watching him with big eyes. "Everything okay, Daddy?" He smiled and nodded. "Yeah, baby. Everything's going to be just fine." And as the jet continued through the sky, the air inside the cabin suddenly felt very different. The moment the co-pilot called Malik Mr. Thompson, everything in the cabin seemed to change. The tension that had been thick like a fog suddenly began to lift. Passengers looked up from their seats, eyes wide with surprise. Clarissa, the flight attendant, stood frozen near the front, clearly caught off guard. Malik sat back down beside Zoe, who was still holding her toy bunny tightly. She looked up at her father with curiosity, sensing something different in the air but not fully understanding it. The co-pilot, a man in his late 40s with kind eyes and a steady voice, stepped closer to Malik. "Mr. Thompson, I'm sorry about the confusion earlier. We didn't realize you were the owner of the jet." Malik nodded calmly. "It's all right. I prefer to keep a low profile." The co-pilot smiled. "That's admirable. Most people would make sure everyone knew." Malik shrugged lightly. "I like being treated like everyone else." Around the cabin, murmurs started spreading. The older couple whispered to each other. The young woman on the phone lowered her voice and watched Malik closely. Even Clarissa's face showed a mix of embarrassment and surprise. Malik looked at Clarissa directly. "I understand if you were just doing your job." Clarissa blinked, clearly uncomfortable. "I didn't mean to offend you." Malik gave a small smile. "I hope this can be a chance to learn something new." She nodded, but her eyes still avoided his. The co-pilot continued. "We'll be landing soon at the New York hangar. Your team will be waiting to meet you." Malik glanced out the window, the city skyline beginning to appear through the clouds. The familiar building stood tall, shining in the late afternoon sun. He thought about how far he had come, from growing up in a small neighborhood, working hard to build a company from nothing to now owning his own plane. But the journey hadn't been easy. Malik had faced many challenges. As a black man in the business world, doors were often closed before he could even step inside. People judged him by his skin color, his quiet nature, or the clothes he wore. But he never let those judgments stop him. Instead, he worked harder, learning everything he could about technology, leadership, and business. He built a company that helped protect important information online, and soon, his success grew. Despite all of this, Malik chose to keep his life simple. He didn't want flashy cars or expensive suits. What mattered most was providing for Zoe and teaching her to be proud of who she was. Zoe stirred again in his lap, rubbing her eyes sleepily. Malik smiled and tucked a strand of hair behind her. "Here, you ready to go home soon?" he asked softly. She nodded, snuggling closer. Meanwhile, Clarissa sat down in a seat near the back, her mind racing. She replayed everything that had happened. The cold looks, the ignored requests the moment she realized Malik was the owner of the plane. She felt embarrassed but also confused. Why had she treated him differently from the start? Was it because he didn't look like what she expected a millionaire to look like? Her thoughts were interrupted by the co-pilot speaking gently to her. "We all make mistakes. What matters is how we learn from them." Clarissa nodded slowly, realizing she had been unfair. She had let assumptions guide her actions, and it wasn't right. Back at Malik's seat, a fellow passenger approached him quietly. It was the elderly woman from earlier. "I'm sorry if things were difficult," she said kindly. "You carry yourself with such grace." Malik smiled warmly. "Thank you. I believe everyone deserves respect." She nodded. "We sometimes forget that." As the plane began its descent, Malik held Zoe's hand tightly. He thought about how important it was to teach her that kindness and dignity were more powerful than anger or bitterness. When the plane finally landed, the engines slowed and the familiar sounds of the hangar welcomed them. Malik's security team was waiting, ready to help with their bags. Clarissa stood by, watching quietly. She didn't know what to say, but she wanted to apologize properly. Malik approached her calmly. "Clarissa, I want you to know that what happened today matters. Not just for me, but for the example it sets." She looked up, eyes filled with regret. "I'm sorry, Mr. Thompson, I didn't mean to be rude. I was wrong." Malik nodded. "Thank you for saying that. I hope you can use this experience to treat others with kindness, no matter who they are." Clarissa gave a small, sincere smile. As they all moved toward the exit, Malik felt a sense of relief. He had handled the situation with calm and respect. He wanted Zoe to remember that no matter how hard life gets, she should always stand tall. Outside the hangar, the sun was setting, painting the sky with warm colors. Malik lifted Zoe into his arms and whispered, "We're home." The story of the flight would soon spread. Some passengers began sharing their experience on social media, telling the world about the man who owned the plane and how he stayed calm under pressure. But Malik didn't want the attention for himself. Instead, he planned to use the moment to do something bigger. He wanted to help others who might face the same unfair treatment. He wanted to start programs to teach young people about business, about dignity, and about believing in themselves, because he knew one thing for sure. Respect wasn't about money or status. It was about seeing the person in front of you and treating them with kindness. And on this flight, that lesson was learned by everyone. After the plane touched down and the passengers began to disembark, the atmosphere was filled with a mix of relief and quiet curiosity. Malik held Zoe's hand tightly as they made their way off the aircraft. His security team waited nearby, ready to assist with their bags, but Malik moved forward calmly, with the same quiet confidence he carried throughout the flight. Clarissa lingered near the exit, clearly unsure of what to do. She watched Malik approach, her face showing a mixture of regret and nervousness. The experience on the plane had shaken her more than she expected. She hadn't meant to act the way she did. But now she understood how her assumptions had hurt someone who deserved respect. Malik stopped just a few steps away from her. His voice was steady, kind but serious. "Clarissa, I want to talk with you for a moment." She swallowed and nodded, her eyes looking down. "Yes, Mr. Thompson. I'm very sorry for how I treated you and your daughter. It was wrong." Malik smiled gently. "Thank you for saying that. It takes courage to admit when we've made mistakes." Clarissa looked up, meeting his eyes. "I didn't know who you were at first, and I let that affect how I behaved. That's no excuse." "I hope I can do better," Malik nodded. "We all have moments where we don't live up to our best selves. What matters is that we learn and grow from them." He paused, then added, "I don't want this to be just about what happened today. I want it to be a reminder for everyone, especially those who serve others, to treat every person with kindness and respect no matter their background or appearance." Clarissa blinked, taking in his words. "I understand." Malik glanced down at Zoe, who was looking up at him with tired eyes. He wrapped an arm around her and smiled. "Thank you for listening." Clarissa gave a small nod, then stepped back, quietly. Meanwhile, word about the incident had already reached the charter company. The management quickly contacted Malik, apologizing for the crew's behavior and promising a full investigation. Malik's response was measured. He didn't want to escalate the situation, but he wanted to make sure it was taken seriously. "I'm not interested in punishment for its own sake," he said during the call. "I want to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else." Within hours, Clarissa was informed that she would be temporarily suspended, pending a full review of the incident. The company explained that they needed to look closely at her conduct and provide training to prevent similar situations in the future. Though Clarissa felt worried about the consequences, she also felt a growing desire to change. She realized how important it was to challenge her own biases and treat every passenger with fairness. Back at his home, Malik sat at his desk late into the night. He looked over plans for the mentorship program he had been building for months. The incident on the plane had strengthened his resolve. He wanted to create a space where young people, especially Black fathers like himself, could learn skills, build confidence, and find support. He thought about Zoe's future. He wanted her to grow up in a world where people saw her for who she truly was, not based on assumptions or stereotypes. He wanted to help build that world. In the days that followed, Malik spoke to a few reporters who had heard about the story, but he kept his answers simple and focused. When asked about the incident, he said, "What matters most is not the conflict, but how we respond to it. We can choose to rise above hurt and show respect to others. That's the kind of example I want to set for my daughter." His words resonated with many people. Social media began to share his story widely, not because of his wealth, but because of his kindness and strength. Some passengers on the flight posted their thoughts online too, praising Malik's calmness and grace under pressure. They spoke about how important it was to recognize our common humanity, no matter where someone comes from. Clarissa, too, made a public statement expressing regret and promising to learn from her mistake. She spoke about the importance of respect and understanding in every interaction. Malik didn't seek out the attention, but he used it as a platform to start something bigger. He officially launched his mentorship program, inviting young fathers and entrepreneurs to join. The program focused on business skills, personal growth, and the power of kindness. He worked closely with community leaders and organizations to make sure the program reached those who needed it most. As for Zoe, she continued to grow surrounded by her father's love and guidance. She didn't remember all the details of the flight, but she knew one thing clearly, that her daddy always stood up for what was right, without anger or fear. One afternoon, Malik took Zoe to a park near their home. She ran ahead, laughing with other children. Malik watched, feeling proud and hopeful. Life wasn't always easy, but moments like these made it worth it. Respect, dignity, and kindness. Those were the real treasures Malik wanted to pass on, and in the end, that was the greatest gift of all. After the story of the flight spread, Malik's life changed in ways he hadn't expected. The video taken by one of the passengers showing the moment Clarissa slapped him, went viral. But it wasn't the slap that captured people's hearts. It was how Malik stayed calm, kind, and respectful despite the unfair treatment. News outlets invited him to share his thoughts, but Malik always focused on the bigger message. He didn't want to be just a viral story or a moment of controversy. Instead, he wanted to use this experience to teach something important about respect, dignity, and standing tall even when others don't treat you well. One morning, Malik woke up to messages from people all over the country. Some were thanking him for inspiring them. Others shared their own stories of facing unfairness or feeling invisible. There were young fathers, students, and even people from different walks of life who said Malik's words gave them hope. Malik felt a strong responsibility. He realized this was more than a story. It was a chance to make real change. He called his team and worked quickly to launch the mentorship program he had been planning for months. It was designed to help young fathers and entrepreneurs, especially those from communities that often face barriers. The program would teach business skills, build confidence, and offer support for personal growth. Malik knew that success wasn't just about money or owning a plane. It was about lifting others up and giving them tools to build better futures. At the same time, Clarissa's life took a difficult turn. The charter company, after reviewing the incident carefully, decided to end her contract. They felt her behavior did not meet the standards of respect and professionalism they expected. Clarissa was sad but understood the decision. She reached out to Malik, asking if there was any way she could learn from this and make amends. Malik, ever the kind person, encouraged her to take the experience as a lesson. He believed everyone deserved a second chance if they were willing to grow. Clarissa took that advice seriously. She signed up for customer service and diversity training classes and started volunteering with organizations focused on equality and respect. She wanted to make sure she never treated anyone unfairly again. Back in his home, Malik spent many evenings working on his program while Zoe played nearby. He often paused to watch her, amazed at how much joy she brought into his life. She was curious, bright, and full of dreams. He wanted her to grow up knowing her worth, no matter what others might say or think. One day, Malik invited some of the young men from his mentorship program to a special event. They gathered in a community center filled with laughter and conversation. Malik shared his story, not to boast but to show how strength comes from kindness and patience. He told them, "Sometimes people will judge you by what they see on the outside, but that doesn't define who you are. What matters is how you treat yourself and others. Respect isn't just given, it's earned by showing it to everyone." The young men listened closely. Many nodded, feeling inspired by Malik's words and example. Zoe played nearby with other children, her laughter filling the room. Malik smiled, knowing that the future he was helping build would be brighter because of moments like this. Outside the spotlight, Malik's life remained grounded. He continued to grow his business quietly, always focused on giving back. His story wasn't about fame, it was about creating a legacy of kindness and opportunity. One afternoon, Malik and Zoe went for a walk in the park. The sun was warm and the air smelled fresh. Zoe ran ahead to join some friends, waving back at her dad with a big smile. Malik watched her, feeling proud and hopeful. The journey had not been easy, but every challenge had made him stronger. He knew there would still be hard days, but he was ready. Respect, kindness, and dignity were not just words, they were a way of life. And as the sun set behind the trees, Malik whispered to himself, "This is only the beginning." Because sometimes the smallest moments, like a calm response on a plane, can change the world for the better. And for Malik, Zoe, and all those touched by this story, that was the greatest truth of all.